Up next, we've got a preview of Arkansas versus South Carolina. The Gamecocks got their first win of the season this weekend against Georgia State, but not without effort. They're definitely going to have to step up their game this weekend, going up against number 19 Arkansas, who beat Cincinnati on Saturday. Now, to talk more about this matchup, I've got here with me Keith Alsep. He is the host of the Locked on the Gamecocks podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Kennedy, doing great. How about you? I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend.
You know, I was in here working. It is football season, no days off. So I just wanted
That's true.
Yeah, I wanted to get started talking about last weekend's matchup. So first game of the season under the belt. What were your biggest takeaways from South Carolina's first game against Georgia State?
Well, Kennedy, I thought South Carolina won with complimentary football. I thought they played excellent defense, particularly after Georgia State drove down the field on the opening drive. South Carolina's defense adjusted nicely, and then they responded to some adversity in the third quarter. Spencer Rattler threw a ball that probably should have been caught, but it went through the receiver's hands. Georgia State scores a touchdown, and all of a sudden they go up 14-12, and South Carolina marched right down the field on their best drive of the game to retake the lead and really never looked back. And then they blocked 2 punts for touchdowns, something that had not been done since 2000 when Lou Holtz was the coach of the Gamecocks. So, I definitely think the offense has to improve, but I liked what I saw from the defense. Georgia State was the number 8 rushing team in all of college football last year. They returned, I believe, 10 starters on offense, and they give South Carolina kind of a look at what you'll see against Arkansas, but their quarterback, who was their third leading rusher, 6'4", 195, but he's not KJ Jefferson, who's 6'3", 245. And so it's certainly going to be a step up for South Carolina this week, no doubt about it.
So touching on the offense, Spencer Rattler, it was his debut with the Gamecocks. What were your thoughts on his first game?
Well, I thought he made some great scramble plays, but quite frankly, his offensive line didn't give him time to throw the football. And then I thought he probably made 2 or 3 really poor decisions throwing the football. Once on a deep shot into double coverage. Couldn't really blame the first interception on him, but they had 3rd and short, and he could have ran for the first down. It was a rollout. Or he could have thrown the underneath wide receiver, and he threw it right into coverage where it was intercepted. So I thought there was some good and some bad with Spencer Rattler. But I just did not think South Carolina was able to give Spencer Rattler time in the pocket. He was under duress most of the night.
So Arkansas is going to have a pretty tough defense for him. What do you think specifically he needs to be focusing on looking up to this matchup?
Well, I think the big thing is word out of Fayetteville this morning is 2 starters in their secondary and 1 Jalen Catalon, their All-American safety, and starting nickel Miles Slusher could be out for this game. I think Cincinnati took advantage of Arkansas in the passing game, but they had their running game going. Luke Fickell runs a tough program up there. They had the run game going. They hit a play action over the top for a deep ball for a touchdown. I think, number one, South Carolina has to do a much better job of establishing the run against Arkansas, and then I think they've got to take some shots and get some big plays against a secondary that could be vulnerable minus 2 starters this weekend.
Spencer had 2 interceptions in the last game. Was that just a part of the shaking the rust off, or is that something we should be concerned about going ahead?
Well, like I said, the first one, it went right through the receiver's hands. I don't really put that on him, but it was his first game in a brand new system. He was under duress most of the night. And, the old coaching adage, you make the most improvement from week 1 to week 2. And I think for South Carolina fans and for South Carolina's coaching staff, they have to hope that that old adage is true on Saturday, because it's going to take a lot of offensive improvement to go to Fayetteville and beat Arkansas.
I think the two real shining stars of that game was the defense and specifically the special teams. Was that kind of a surprise to you how well they did?
It really was not. I mean, we knew Georgia State would run the football after the first drive. South Carolina held them at bay until basically the game was over. They picked up a couple of big chunk plays. South Carolina is much more athletic at linebacker, which was a big issue last year. They return a lot of players up front. They're pretty deep there. On defense, probably the biggest surprise was the play of two true freshmen as the backup safeties, one of whom, Nick Emanwari, was pressed into early duty due to an injury to R.J. Roderick. He had the big stop on 4th down. He had several other tackles and then a pass breakup as well. And so that was a bright spot. And, Pete Limbo may be the best special teams coach in the country. Shane Beamer, Beamer ball was built on special teams. And, you had a fake field goal, you had 2 punt blocks for touchdown, and you had a 79-yard punt. And additionally, you had a first-time field goal kicker. His first 2 career field goal attempts were 53 and 51 yards, and he split the uprights both times. But they did snap the ball over the holder's head on the first extra point, almost all the way back to midfield. So a lot to clean up for South Carolina after week 1, for sure.
Yeah, that stat lines from the special teams was really a trip when you're reading it. So what are your thoughts now, first game with Coach Shane Beamer?
Well, I think, this is his second year. He's a lot more comfortable in his skin. He returned most all of his coaching staff. But it's going to be a big test. This team did not perform well in true road games last year. Certainly, most of your listeners will remember just how poorly it went in College Station. The same was true of in Neyland Stadium. The game was over 10 minutes in. And so this is a big test for South Carolina. Can they show improvement on the road? They have better players. They have more experienced players than they had last year. Can they make a better showing on the road, or could they even break through with a big road win? I think that is what is on the mind of most South Carolina fans this week.
Now, you're there in Columbia. Can you give me a gauge of what the fan base is feeling right now with Coach Shane Beamer?
Well, I think this fan base is 100% behind Shane Beamer. You had a sellout crowd for a non-conference game, which that's pretty much an anomaly these days, right, Kennedy? Because every game is on television now. The Gamecock walk, where they walk from the practice facility to the stadium, it was a sea of garnet. There must have been over 20,000 fans out there for that. It was incredible. It was an incredible atmosphere. The 2001, they've made a lot of improvements to the stadium with LED lights. That first sandstorm was amazing. And it was a great home environment. And after, I think the over-under last year was 3 wins by the Wise Guys for South Carolina. Obviously, they won 6. They got to a bowl game. They upset North Carolina. And, then Spencer Rattler and Austin Stogner announced they're coming. You sign a top 20 recruiting class. You fill a number of needs in the transfer portal. And this was a much anticipated second season. And I think South Carolina fans are expecting improvement. And that is to, go on the road. Yes, you're playing a top 25 team. Be competitive. get the game into the fourth quarter and give yourself a chance to win. Then you jump out of the frying pan into the pot next week. You play Georgia, who quite frankly looked like the best team in the country, even with losing all those guys to the NFL. So the next 2 weeks are, going to be a big challenge for Shane Beamer in year 2 of his program.
A challenge indeed. So what do you think he needs to do to make sure that the Gamecocks can rise to the occasion?
Well, I think it all starts up front with the offensive line, Kennedy. They have got to show improved play. I think Marcus Satterfield, as an old coach, I could tell you, when you can't run the football and you can't get your perimeter game going, it's just hard to find a rhythm as a play caller. I think they need to simplify what they're doing. I think Jaheim Bell needs to be more involved in the passing game. And they've got to do something for their play caller to be able to get into a rhythm and call plays, because when you can't run the football and you can't establish a short passing game, you don't really know what to go to on your play sheet at that point.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Keith. That was Keith Alsep with Locked on the Gamecocks podcast.